Hi, everyone. My name is Mujtaba Wani. I'm an investor at GSV Ventures, where I focus on India especially. And today we have some of the leading venture capitalists from India, all of whom are very active in the EdTech space. We have Mukul Arora, partner at Elevation Capital, Karthik Reddy, co-founder and managing partner of Blume Ventures, Shripati Acharya, managing partner at Prime Venture Partners, and Pankaj Makkar, managing director at Bertelsmann India Investments. And today we're going to have a discussion on the edtech ecosystem in India, specifically what's next after a very interesting 16 months in the pandemic period. So just to open it, I'll start with Mukul, and just want to ask, it's been a very interesting year. Obviously, a lot of acceleration. What's your assessment of what is permanent change and what's going to kind of fade away after the world normalizes a little bit?
Sure, Mushtava. Great to be here with everyone and look forward to an exciting discussion. So on your question, see, if we look at last 18 months, right, what the pandemic has done is pre-pandemic, there always used to be a big mental barrier towards online education that, hey, offline is better, there is better engagement, etc. Whereas online does not cut it. But I think, and therefore there was a barrier to trial. But in the last 18 months, that barrier to trial got taken away forcibly. Everyone had to go through online, everyone experienced what it really means. And I think, therefore, once things open up once again, it will come down to pure meritocracy. For a particular sliver of the market, is online better or offline better? And whichever provides a better solution to the student and to the parents is going to win. And I'll take a couple of examples, right? So I think if we look at a segment such as test prep, there online is 10x better than offline, because in offline students would typically not get access to high quality teachers, or very few students would get access to high quality teachers, whereas now in the online world, platforms like Unacademy have democratized that access. Also, as a student, you are not wasting your time in commuting, you just take your classes from home. You are able to compete with a much larger student base and actually know where you are. So online is 10x better than offline. So even post pandemic, it will only continue to gain share. On the other end of the spectrum, if I, let's say, look at hobby classes for kids, there I think it's a more nuanced answer. So if for a parent like me who's living in a metro city where offline supply exists, my kid wants to learn tabla, he'll go to an offline class. That experience is very hard to replicate online. But the reason I said it's nuanced is, even for, let's say, a kid who is living in a small city where there is no great supply, for them online might still be the best answer for learning tabla even post pandemic. So overall, I think that barrier to trial has gone away, and large parts of market will continue to grow pretty fast, even once things return back to normal.
Building on that, Karthik, do you see any areas of the edtech market which suffered because of the lockdown, but will actually recover and hopefully have a surge in a normal world?
I think two sets of answers for that. One, I think, is the idea that for all age groups that learning online was difficult, that has been washed away, right? So I think, as Mukul commented, as you look at even the age groups that in the work environment, so suddenly they find that their ability to learn from world-class curriculum, world-class teachers, institutions is also sort of grown. So I feel like continued learning, higher education beyond their college degrees, etc., is something that I think is here to last, and will probably see an even improved sort of traction from where it was. The second, I think schools, or the lack of school time for children, has hurt the entire sort of ecosystem. I'm not talking about maybe 9th grade to 12th grade, which is more, has a level of preparedness in the mind of the child that can sort of comply with online and see the advantages of it. But K8, as my colleague Sajid says, is as much of a daycare and a social skills market, right? As much as it is an education market. And the beauty of that is to combine these two aspects, because I don't think any parent on this call or otherwise has actually asked for a subsidy on learning unless your income means were a struggle. because you know that continuity is what you want to build into the child's life once the pandemic opens. So schools, I think, are in a very interesting position, or institutional, gatekeepers are in an interesting position, because they can cater to those aspects far more deeply, and then also leverage, online elements or digital traces, as we're calling them, from the pandemic to actually level the playing field with the bigger schools. So I don't think these, the privilege of being in a big school, which charges a few $1,000s per year, versus somebody who charges, literally in India, you have schools with $200, $300 a year. You suddenly can embellish that learning and almost level the quality as a school. Just as Mukul was saying, someone in a small town who doesn't have access to great teaching, a small town school can now compete with giving the best quality education as well. So I think institutions of all kinds, corporate schools, etc., can actually facilitate the best in quality education for their wards, whether those are K-8 students or whether they're employees or whether you have to do coaching, all of those get upgraded. And I think it's a phenomenal moment in that fashion, where that change to enforce would have taken years, but it just happened very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. We're investors at GSV in lead school, which of course the entire proposition is to level the playing field, improve quality of an affordable education at scale in India, and really provide a consistent curriculum, if you will, at a very affordable price point. And of course, some of the companies that folks here are investors in, like Karthik, you and Unacademy are. That's the entire mission, right? Providing a really high quality product instead of to a few people in a local coaching center to millions of people across the country. And obviously,
Yep.
as companies like Academy and BYJU'S build incredible scale and buy a lot of other companies as well, the market starts to saturate a little bit in certain segments. So if I can go to Shripati, what's your sense of which segments of the market do you think are now maybe too hot, too saturated, too competitive? Well, are there areas that you think are completely open for business? What's your take there?
Yeah, I really like the comment that Karthik made there, that K through 8 is also really a little bit of daycare and social skills in addition to education. And so the difference there also is that the customer there is the parent, versus when you start going to the older section of the students. And I feel that thing which might be overdone here is that this parent is now bombarded with now an online for everything, right? There's online for an instrument, there's online for dance, some extracurricular, there's online for sports, and then there's of course online for all the STEM classes. And the parents are scratching their heads that how much of my time is actually going to be spent online. Forget actually how much of the spend is going to happen. So I do feel that once the schools open up, which we are really hoping it happens very soon, that this section of the market might actually see some, the demand get a little bit more muted and maybe a little bit more nuanced. So the parents might want to get some parts of this still be online, but other parts will probably go back to being offline because they're just so much better at it, right? How can you do social skills online? It's difficult. You can probably simulate it, but it's really not the real thing. However, the things which will continue to, which we are just at the beginning of, and which you're going to surge, is another part, you allude at affordability, engagement of the students, and scaling this engagement. Those are, I feel, still problems yet to be cracked. We have sort of gone with a model where this is the first phase of things going online. We are classically addressing probably the top third of highly motivated students who want to be there, who know how to absorb the online teaching paradigm and so forth. But there are the other students, and online has the beautiful ability that we can customize the content exactly to that particular student and also get them motivated. And I think some of those things we will see are yet to be cracked. The other thing which I will say, as Mukul mentioned about trial, that the student trial has dramatically increased, but so has the trial by teachers. I mean, these are the suppliers into the education ecosystem, and they were, very comfortable with offline. And now what the pandemic has forced is really a first-time trial of teaching online, and for them to get an aha moment of what online means.
Yeah, building on that, Shripati or anyone else, have you seen engagement models or motivation models, or personalized learning is a buzzword we hear a lot in EdTech? Have you seen any companies doing that in a way that you find really really meaningful, really effective?
Maybe I'll just make a quick comment and then pass on the baton here. What we're beginning to see is the role of machine, or you could call it AI, in terms of personalizing the education paths becoming more prominent, or at least it's being tried. And we will see, I think there is some evidence of that, but making it highly adaptive is something which we are beginning to see companies try out. And I think they're just the beginning stages of that. But we will see this role increasing going forward, in my opinion.
Yeah. So kind of building on this saturation, if you will, or opportunity areas, a lot of companies, especially the larger players, are clearly going vertical and horizontal, right? BYJU'S is, in some ways, a complete what we call pre-K to grade platform, everything from early childhood to K-12, and looks like they're moving into test prep with, of course, the acquisition of Akash. And if they buy Great Learning, they'll be all the way into workforce training. Pankaj, you're an investor in Eruditus through Bertelsmann. They're, of course, doing the acquisition of the K-12 STEM company in the US. How do you all think about this sort of consolidation, this verticalization? What do you think makes sense? Do you have any concerns as these companies do these kind of expansions?
Sure. No, happy to kind of talk about that. And I think it's a really interesting point when large platforms are getting built. This is perhaps what happened in e-commerce in the US in the early 2000s. In India, in e-commerce, perhaps from 2010 to 2013 to 2017 and so on. And the entire concept was trying to kind of build matching of demand and supply. And that's what BYJU'S does and Academy does and so on. Now, within that, once you kind of perfect that for a certain target audience, you can definitely do that for other target audiences as well. And in the case of Eruditus or in the case of BYJU'S, etc., BYJU'S started with K-12, and of course, they're kind of moving up and up in terms of age groups and kind of providing such services and products and services to I would say, adult learners, while Eruditus started way above at the adult learner space and going kind of down. That kind of makes a lot of sense in my mind, because at the end of the day, you're trying to either as a provider or as an enabler, trying to match demand and supply of high quality education with learners who have a very significant demand for that product. And I do feel that, kind of integrating that and building that one large platform makes a lot of sense. That's what we saw happening in e-commerce as well, where horizontals kind of built very, very large platforms and built a bunch of services around that. We see that happening in EdTech right now.
Yeah. Do you think it becomes harder for the companies to differentiate then when they all offer classes, products across the whole spectrum, right? If you have in the US at least, it's Amazon versus Walmart, and you can kind of buy the same things at both platforms, but they're both sort of, the product becomes commoditized.
Well, to a certain extent, it would, right? But again, the underlying concept is to a certain extent, depends on what product you're kind of teaching and so on. There are certain streams which are a lot more commoditized than otherwise. But I hope that the layer of AI ML that gets built eventually, which goes to personalization of education, removes that commoditization of plain vanilla supply of quality of and high quality of education that's kind of come in today. So I hope that kind of goes away eventually. But as of now, yes, and probably Karthik and others can kind of talk about it. But if there's a certain course on Unacademy versus 2-3 other platforms, today that's quietly very strongly differentiated. But 3-4 years down the line, it would be certainly to a certain extent commoditized, right?
So I actually have a couple of thoughts on this, Mushtava. One is, I think one of the factors which is driving this vertical and horizontal expansion is also just the sheer amount of capital that is available, and also that capital is getting concentrated to category or market leaders, right? So we can count those 4 or 5 players on our fingers where 90% of the EdTech funding is going. And I think therefore, as a result, I think some of these expansions are natural, they make sense. So for example, if you are in K-12, maybe test prep makes sense. I'm not sure all of these are organic or all of these make sense. Some of these are because you have capital, you have to expand your TAM, you have to therefore sort of shoot for a larger outcome. And therefore, even if we fast forward 3, 4, 5 years, my sense is each company, like if you look at a certain segment, if you look at test prep, I actually don't think everyone will look similar. I feel there will be 1 or 2 players which would have gone really deep and differentiated themselves similarly on higher ed, whereas all of them might have like, hey, I'm really strong at test prep, and then by the way, these are 3 other offerings which you could look at as a student or parent. So I think that is very, very important. Unlike e-commerce, where in some ways it's a commodity service, in education it's not going to get as uniform and as standardized. Having said that, the second thought I have, where actually I also draw an implication from e-commerce, is that because all these players are trying to go so broad and trying to do everything under the sun, I think now is actually a great time for younger founders to say, hey, which are the slivers which are deep enough where we can differentiate and actually completely hit it out of the park in that market. So for example, if we take test prep as a segment, in India, there are exams which, like single exam, which like hundreds of thousands or millions of students would be taking. So can you go after that, take a more community-led approach and build something which is just focused on that? So that opportunity is also now opening up, like the vertical e-commerce opportunity opened up in India in 2010, 2011, when the horizontals had started breaking out.
Yeah. Karthik, any thoughts on, I personally was very surprised when I saw Unacademy going to cricket. That, that was one I didn't expect at all. Would love your thoughts as well.
I think some of them are being done for brand appeal. Some are being done for the existing customers, and some are being done to expand the customer base and try to also catch the funnel at both ends, right? So if you have a kid who's going to college, they're prepping for college and they're prepping for postgrad, right? And so you're essentially expanding the lifetime value of the consumer as well. So I don't think it's as straight-laced as, trying to grab different businesses for the sake of, but try to build, if you're thinking really long-term, as maybe the market leaders are. Education brands, I feel like financial services brands or health brands are very, very close to the customer's heart in terms of just building long-term trust, right? It's almost like the play you're making through some cricket advertising right now will probably yield you your customers in 2025, right? So it's a very long-term game. And that also means that you have to develop those funnels earlier than later. You simply can't seed ground to someone who's actually doing K8 and then say, hey, I won't do anything until they come to grade 9. What if the competitor then builds 9 to 12 capacity as well as you do, right? And so, and I think that is what's driving some of this, if you ask me. The second is, I think digital is a great leveler, right? Unlike, some businesses like education were sort of deliberately kept as hyperlocal or were centered around physical presence of schools, of coaching centers, etc. And digital has just normalized that, which then basically means it naturally lends itself to economies of scale, which is essentially what Amazon did to the horizontal commerce market. That you build scale capacities which the old world cannot build, and that's what they're doing. They're kind of crushing the old, economy plays around test prep, etc., and building 2 or 3 large consolidated plays. So I do think there will only be 2, 3 big players in every space 5 years from now, but they might not be the same in every part of the age spectrum. I think we'll have different competitors. And what I think the EdTech players are doing, much like even the e-commerce guys did historically, are where they find that they have a capital arbitrage opportunity, they're buying into segments that they won't be able to build for the next 4 years. But they do see them independently potentially growing into unicorn levels. So if somebody's making a play on great learning or upgrad, it's because you can see that on a standalone basis becoming, a multi-billion-dollar company, but you have the ability to actually keep it independent and grow that on, the side. And so essentially India's, I think, sensed the opportunity that you can build a few decacons in this space, not happy with unicorns anymore. And so it seems like that the expansion urge is coming from that as well. But early to say. It'll be very interesting to see where we land up in 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, it's so many thoughts on that. One is just culturally, India is of course different. Every country, every region has a celebrity culture, but in the U.S., LeBron James sells you basketball shoes. Maybe a global soccer star, Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, can sell you soda or some clothes or something. But Shah Rukh Khan or a cricket star would not sell a test prep course. It wouldn't compute. But very, very, very different in terms of building brand credibility. But no, sorry, Karthik. Building on a few things you were saying, you talked about building a few EdTech decacorns in India. What do you all think of the and maybe I'll direct this to Shripati since Prime is an investor in quizzes. What do you think of the export opportunity? Right, a big thing that we've been tracking is Indian EdTech as a global export. The massive opportunity to sell these products and these services globally in every segment.
Yeah, one of the things which has been a very positive surprise here is that India as a base for providing EdTech solutions across the globe is becoming more and more exciting. And one of the learnings which we had from quizzes was that you could actually do that sitting entirely out of India, or for the most part out of India. And the reason for that is that the availability of information in terms of what teachers, in the case of quizzes, are looking for in the US, for example, the discussions which they are having, it is possible for entrepreneurs sitting in India to be participating in that, to actually understand and empathize with what is it that they are looking for. And increasingly, a high school student in India or a middle school student in India is actually undergoing a very similar experience than what a high school or a middle school student in the US is actually experiencing. So there is a leveling of the requirements here. But the fact that we have completely democratized the access to compute and the access to search, you can actually go ahead and target a solution which is for a school in Boston, which is teaching a particular STEM courses, as easily as doing it for folks in India. And the advantage here is that, of course, India has a base for very highly skilled yet cost-effective development center, makes all of this possible. So I think that it is just a confluence of what we have been talking about all these years, which is cheap cloud, extremely efficient search, the ability to actually connect, actually tilts the scales in favor of entrepreneurs who actually have a visceral understanding of what the consumer needs here, who have that ability to connect and have a conversation, in the case of quizzes, with the teachers in across the globe. So I feel that it's going to be something which we are going to see increasingly. Of course, some things like curriculum and specifically those areas are going to be different, but that's one aspect. The second aspect, of course, is the supply of teachers themselves. So India has a very educated workforce, and of course, a lot of availability of teachers who have time on their hands, who actually are teachers themselves or are doing something else. They might be, postgraduate students, etc., who are very eager and willing to actually be tutor younger kids. So now a marketplace in which you can get access to high quality, but again, cost-effective teachers and students on the other side who are looking for this. I think this is a very obvious thing which startups and companies are going to facilitate. So I'm very bullish about this trend.
Absolutely, and I want to give Pankaj an opportunity to chime in there, especially given Eruditus is a majority ex-India business and a extremely global business. I don't think any one region is more than a third of the business active in China, LATAM, the US. It's incredible.
I would agree with Shripati completely that the combination of having high quality content providers, whether they are teachers teaching on a synchronous basis, or even if in the case of Eruditus, we have to get content from top schools from the West, but the creation cost around that content was so low for us that we are almost breaking even today, whereas our competition in the West, again, some listed entities, continue to be loss-making. And that is the arbitrage that I think Indian entrepreneurs have in their favor, both from building top class kind of technology companies, but also at the same time putting together very high quality content, which is obviously on the lower cost side, and thus benefiting building such companies selling out of India for the global audiences. And I do agree that we think that massive amount of companies will end up getting built out of India, which will serve the global market, and that is an opportunity for all entrepreneurs there.
Yeah, and while we're talking about sort of the Indian talent pool, I would, love any of your all thoughts on the entrepreneurs and what you've seen, especially in the last year. Has there been any change in the talent pool? And in the U.S., we've certainly seen education companies attracting top talent and founders who may have not been interested in EdTech before.
Look, I generally feel that the talent in terms of any type of sector, when it comes to startups in India, there are entrepreneurs who are building global propositions. And from that perspective, even in education or EdTech, we would see fantastic talent kind of build amazing companies, global companies, as far as technology and product is concerned. The other very interesting thing to kind of note is that India sends about 150 to 200,000 students every year to the US to study. A lot of us has been exposed to global education businesses. We have gone to these top schools. We have studied. We know what the bar is as far as the top schools are concerned, especially when it comes to higher education and masters and bachelor programs and so on. And hence kind of trying to replicate that quality standard is something that's fairly well known to a lot of entrepreneurs, including of people like Ashwin at Eruditus, who had gone to Harvard and he kind of knew what the gold standard was. And he said, I want to now build that for the rest of the world. Let's do that. And I do feel that there are a lot of young people in India who have been exposed to that.
Mujtaba, here, like if you look at quality of founders or even next level teams in EdTech, I think we have gone through 3 phases. If you look at sort of, at least I entered the world of venture capital 11 years back, and I've seen 3 distinct phases. In those early days when everyone realized internet was becoming big in India, there were very, very high quality teams going after EdTech. And like Pankaj said, anyone who has either gone abroad or even if you haven't gone abroad, you've just studied in India, you are well educated, you can find a lot of things which are broken with the education system. And when you think about starting up, that's almost like the first place you want to start. So 28, 9 till sort of 13, 14 or 12, 13, there were a lot of very high quality founders at that time. And then I think people saw that, hey, there are so many smart people going after EdTech, but nothing is getting created. And then there was this 3-4 year phase in between when actually the number of EdTech companies being formed, the quality of teams, all of that just went down. And all of that went either in e-commerce, hyper local, on demand, all those kind of spaces. And now in the last 3-4 years, again, it has gone through an inflection point. Obviously, since COVID, there's been a natural acceleration. But last 3-4 years, the quality of teams that have entered EdTech is just at a very different level. And obviously, credit goes to Unacademy, BYJU'S, Eruditus, all of these who have shown that if you execute well, what you can become. So now the quality of talent is just world class in EdTech.
Yeah. Do you all have you seen the profile of founders that you like or that you think can build different types of businesses change? Obviously, you have founders like BYJU who were instructors, they were teachers, they were tutors. You have folks with some education background or not in different companies. Some who are more from the tech world, some from the finance or operational world. What have you all observed? What do you like? What are your concerns?
I think to extend Mukul's point, if you look at least most of the EdTech founders I've come across have sort of deeply felt the problem, and that's probably true of most sectors. The most path-defining companies in a particular market or a particular sector are not built because the entrepreneur has just the chutzpah to go and challenge the status quo, but they actually feel for the problem very, very deeply. And it's not surprising, like the first iteration when BYJU'S started was long ago, 10, 12 years ago. The Merit Nation guys classmates. Basically, they used to actually had MS franchisees. There were other franchisees of offline class curriculum for prep. So it's a natural progression, I thought, when the first iteration happened. The second iterations almost invariably, Mujtaba, happen when you have the first set of unicorns or large companies form. And as one of my panelists said, there will be gaps in the market which they see are never going to be addressed by the mothership, right? And I think you're beginning to see that second wave today. And a part of it is the point you touched upon earlier. Why limit yourself to Indian markets where the dollar, paying capacity is always going to be competitive, either with your competitor or either with the student or with the parent, right? Why don't we build ideas which are in interesting niches, but the market size just grows 100x if you take it global, right? And of course, White Hat was an early example of that. Quizzes is another one, and Shripati's portfolio. But you're going to see a lot more of that, is my take. Even a guy like Leverage, he's not going to be happy pushing a subset of those 150,000 students. He wants to get even, potentially Bangladeshi and Pakistani students who want to go to the West. And eventually the market size just expands dramatically. And I think that's the opportunity set, if you ask me. And as big as the Chinese companies are, I think we have a language advantage and we have a huge Western market with a high paying capacity and income earning capacity. And that's the direction in which education goes. The end purpose is to get a great job and a great livelihood. And that's the reality for most of the developing world, right? It's not for getting PhDs and winning Nobels. That's a very, unfortunately, it's 1% of the audience can aspire to that. For the other 99, it's around getting to livelihood and improving your strata from where you are to two notches higher. And education is seen as that. Is the best tool to be able to do that. So I think it's a phenomenally interesting time to see how these folks can graduate to this level.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick point related to that, which is when we talk about what is attracting the talent, Mushtava, it's also that now the Indian edtechs are in the lens of global investors. And you have the global capital now looking for innovative startups in the edtech scene in India, which is a virtuous cycle, which actually propels very high quality founders to actually look at problems here which they wish to solve, not just for India, but from a global lens. So I think all of these things will probably propel more number of startups and more number of founders to actually get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's us, right? GSV has been well connected with Indian founders for maybe a decade now through the ASU+GSV Summit, of course, and I think BYJU'S first came in 2017. Some of the upgrad folks, Mayank and such, have been coming for many years. But in the last 14 months, we've signed 7 term sheets and have four announced deals. So of course the opportunity is great, and we're very excited. And as we run out of time, this is perhaps a good way to end. I'd love to sort of do a round robin and ask everyone just to briefly touch on a portfolio company in the space that they're very excited about. And I'll start with Mukul.
Sure. So actually one company, Mushtava, which is fairly young in our portfolio, and it's also going after a fairly atypical segment of the market. So Karthik mentioned that at the end of the day, everyone is sort of looking for education as a way to uplift their quality of life. And this company's name is Air Black. So what they are trying to do is they are trying to create micro entrepreneurs. So one of the course which is right now their primary offering is a course where they help women in becoming makeup artists. So the whole thesis is that in India, if you look at whether it is number of people coming out of school, number of people graduating versus actual formal job creation, there is a massive gap. And the only way to plug that gap is if people start building their own businesses. So the idea is that can you build a school which is not teaching you engineering, maths, etc., but actually teaching you real life skills which can help you become a micro entrepreneur. So that is one company which I think has a lot of potential and are going after a very, very large problem.
Karthik?
Too many to choose from, but I think fundamentally new way of tackling the market. A company that I think I've spoken to you recently about. It's a company called YOLO in our portfolio. And for the first, by the way, for the school channel for Blume was such a disaster in our first fund that we actually would refuse to finance any company that came and said school is a conduit to actually reach students. And last year we changed our mind, and I think the pandemic helped, and the fact that we knew the founder from before helped. The combination of which I think gives us the hope to say that these schools which are at 10,000 to 30,000 rupees, which is basically $150 to $400 per year fees, those schools are ripe for actually building foundational skills to students, and I feel YOLO has a shot at delivering that. I keep saying, like, there's no chance that kid can catch up after 8th or 9th grade if they haven't been taught the foundational skills of whether it's language or math. The deficit is so deep that maybe 10% of really intelligent kids will make it up. The others have already lost the battle. So I would like to see something phenomenal come to K8 schools, because it's great to say that it'll happen privately, etc. The fee structure doesn't allow it, it's my view. So no one's going to cater to them other than the vast network of school systems, and I'm happy that they're trying to build that. I feel very excited about it.
Awesome. Shripati?
Yeah, I'll probably cheat a little bit and mention two. One which you're well familiar with, which is quizzes, which I believe is addressing the engagement and affordability problem with access to high quality content. And so, as you're aware, it's 80% of K through 12 US schools. So very, very popular, and also not just in US, but across Europe and Southeast Asia as well. So just very excited about how it democratizes the access to education. And a lesser known younger company called WinUall, which is in the space of providing tools really for teachers to go ahead and create a hybrid teaching experience for their classes and their students. So like a Shopify for for an Amazon for education. So the two things which I would say we're very excited about.
Awesome. Pankaj? Oh, you're on mute.
All right. We have a few companies in our portfolio which is in the EdTech space. The two that I get excited about, of course, Eruditors being one, which is now, if we reach a certain scale, it's doing extremely well. And we do believe that like how Amazon's and Google's and other large companies got built in the early 2000s, EdTech would see extremely large outcomes, very large global companies. And I do think that Eruditors has a shot in kind of being one of such companies. And hence, we think that despite the size that it has kind of reached, it's still day one for us. And we're quite excited to see what all they can kind of build. The second company in our portfolio is iNurture, which is in the formal, organized core segment of higher ed. Apparently, we've not seen any other company in the country doing something like that. So it's a fairly unique model. The exciting bit is they are an OPM provider, but in an offline world. And it's a very, very big, challenging problem. It's a complex problem. Most of the higher education institutions in the country do not have good quality setups. And this company is trying to kind of up that quality, which I think also helps kind of get the right amount of education outcomes and to the students who kind of go to these schools. So I'm quite excited about what future this company has. And again, we are all biased to our portfolio company, so I'll probably end at that.
Awesome. Thanks, Pankaj. Thanks, everyone. Mukul, Karthik, Shripati, Pankaj, everyone, for your insights and your time. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see some of you in person at the summit this year, if not next year.
Thanks, Mushtava. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.